Hello everyone, I am Akhilesh Kumar Srivastav from ABS Engineering College, Ghaziabad. In the series of the operating system lectures, we will discuss about the processes, the different states of the processes and the process state transition diagram in today's lecture. As the name suggests, we will be dealing with the processes in this lecture. You must be knowing that whenever you create a program, the program is not a process until it is brought to the main memory. So, we will discuss about when does a program become a process, how does it go through the various states, what are the different steps involved in making a program to the process, and finally, we will solve some questions related to the process. So, the outline of today's lecture would be, we will discuss about the process, we will discuss about various states of the process, then we will discuss about the state transition diagram, we will discuss about the various types of the process, for example, CPU bound processes and the IO bound processes. Now, before going to the process and its formal definition, let us say we have a program. The name of the program is program.c. You are doing the programming in the C language. You have created a program and saved the program in your hard disk. After this, you have started your compilation process. So, compiler internally does some steps to convert this program to the object code. So, what are those steps? The compiler goes through the lexical analysis, the phase in which different tokens are identified, and according to those tokens or according to the identified tokens, the symbol table is prepared and the symbol table stores all the identified symbols. The order of the finding of the different tokens may be different for the different compilers, but the usual order followed is that we first identify the keywords. For example, if this is a C program, then integer, character, float, double, all these are the keywords. For, if, continue, break, these are the keywords. The compiler tries to find out all these keywords, compiler tries to identify these tokens. Internally, this is done through the state diagram, or you can say the DFA, and it is implemented through the tries. So, keywords have been identified. After this, we go for the identification of the identifiers. Identifiers are all those names defined by the user. For example, if I have declared a variable name, so that comes under the category of the identifier. If I have created a function, so this also comes into the category of the identifier. If we have defined any label, so that also comes under the category of the identifiers. So, there are certain rules by which we can write these identifiers. For example, in C language, what we say that an identifier name has to start with an alphabet or the underscore. It cannot contain any other symbol, any other special symbol than the dollar, and the name or the identifier is the combination of the alphabets, numerals, dollar and the underscore, but it has to start with the alphabet only or the underscore. It cannot start with the dollar, it cannot start with the numeral. So, these are the rules for writing this. Similarly, one can say that the length of the identifier cannot be more than 32. So, these are the rules for writing the identifiers. So, once identified the identifiers, we look for the constants. It may be the numeric constant, it may be the character constants, and then we identify the punctuation symbols. Together all with is called the tokens. If different elements that we identify in our program, that actually becomes the token, and we give the space to all these tokens in the symbol table. Now, this symbol table is prepared for reference in the future also. So, this symbol table will remain with the program until the execution of the program completes. So, a symbol table is a very important element for a program. Then we do the syntax analysis. What happens in the syntax analysis phase? The program has been written according to certain rules. Some grammatical rules have already been defined. So, those grammatical rules, for example, there is a particular syntax of writing the for loop, there is a particular syntax of writing the assignment statement. So, are we following that standard? So, if those standards are followed, then we say that the syntax of the program is correct. Wherever there is an error is thrown by the compiler. So, we have done with the syntax analysis. The syntax analysis is related with a term known as semantic analysis. Semantic analysis means we are trying to find out the meaning of the content that we have written in our program. So, compiler tries to find out what is the meaning of the terms or the instructions written by the programmer. The next one is intermediate code generation. It divides the program instructions into the mnemonics, or you can say something like the assembly language code. So, intermediate code generation is dividing the program into the smaller parts, and usually the intermediate codes are written in quadruples or triples. Then we have a process of the code optimization, wherein the programmer has written a bulky code. The effort of the program or the effort of the program execution can be reduced by some defined rules. So, if some of the line or some of the instructions can be reduced, or the number of the execution of some of the instructions can be reduced, so that also is done by the compiler in the phase of the code optimization. And finally, we obtain a code in the code generation phase. So, what is the code generation phase? The code generation phase finally generates the assembly language code required. So, this assembly language code is the object code. This also is called the object code. So, what we have done? We have actually created the object code with the help of the compiler. If my file was program.c, now it has been converted to program.obj or program.o. So, this is the file which has been created as a process of the compilation. Now, after the process of the compilation, we now have to execute this program. So, this just is the object code. In the machine understandable format, I have converted our program, but the next step would be that we will have to create the executable file which can be loaded in the main memory directly. So, we cannot load this in the main memory directly, because there are several other things which are required. So, this is the object code. Let us say this is the object code number 1. There may be some of the other files which may need to link with this file. For example, if we are using the header files, so the header files should also be linked with this program, or if you are doing the coding and you are referring to some other file or other program, so that should also be linked with each other. So, let us say we have x, y and z, and we have created the object file of these also. So, these are also linked with our original programs. So, this process is called the linking. Now, after the linking, the executable file has been created, and this executable file can be loaded in the main memory directly. Fine. Some other activities performed during the execution of the process that you know as the dynamic linking. What we have done in this step before loading it to the main memory, we have linked the static libraries to the current object file or the object file of my program. This is called the static linking. But when program is loaded into the memory, some dynamically linked libraries will be linked with our programs that you call the DLLs. So, DLLs are giving the support to many other programs running in the system. So, that is why the DLLs are not linked in the static time. There is one file, there is one DLL which is being used by several other programs in the system or several other processes which are running in the system. So, we have created the exe file and then we are loading into the memory directly. So, the object, there is a difference between the object file and the exe file. Object file is created by the compiler, but during the execution what we do, we link the static libraries with the object code of static libraries with the current program or the object code of the current program. Okay. So, after this the executable file is created. Now, let us deal with the process now. What is the process? The executable file is a process. The executable file is a process, but it will be a process only if it is brought to the main memory. If it is not brought to the main memory, it will not be the process. So, program and the process, you can say that program is a passive entity. It lies in the hard disk, and usually even if you have compiled your program once, the object file will be there, but when you are executing the process, the executable file will also be there. When you design a program, you may see in the folder in which your program is there will be object file, there will be executable file of the same program, there will be the backup file of your same program. So, executable files are also residing in the hard disk and they are the passive entities, but when they are brought to the main memory, they become the process. When they come to the main memory, they become the process. So, that what you can say that a program under the execution is a process. Okay, program under the execution is a process, and the program is written for the execution of the statements. So, all these statements that you have written in your programs will be executed in the same manner or in the same order that you have defined. So, they will be running in the sequential manner. The program under the execution is becoming a process, and the instructions written inside the program will be executed in the same order that you have defined. So, this is about the process or the simple language. In the simple language, what you can understand the process, that the process is the active entity, program is a passive entity. When the program is brought to the main memory, it has been brought for some purpose, for the execution, for taking some input and generating some output, or for performing some task. So, if it is brought to the main memory, then only it can perform the task, otherwise it cannot perform the task. So, when program is brought to the main memory, it has certain components, a certain region of the memory is given to the program. For example, if this is the program and this is the exe file and it is brought to the main memory, in the main memory we give it some space, and when we give it some space, that space is usually of fixed size. That space is usually of fixed size. If we talk with respect to the C programming language, if the integer is of 2 byte, it means that it will be of 16 bits. It means I can address to 2 raised to the power 16 bytes from the main memory, because if you look at this statement, printf percentile u address of x, let us say x is some variable which is defined. So, when you print the address of x, this address is 16 bits. This is unsigned number. With the 16 bits, you can refer to 2 raised to the power 16 bytes of memory. There you can say that 64 kilobyte. So, every time you create a process, the space of 64 kilobyte gets reserved in the memory. Every process, for every C program, 64 kilobyte will be getting reserved. This will be different for the different processes. I am talking with respect to the compiler, those are using 2 bytes of integers. And then there are several segments, or there are several parts of this process. It means when you are bringing the program, there will be instructions. These instructions are the text. So, these instructions are going in the text segment of your process or your process boundaries. So, these are the process boundaries. This is the higher address and this is the lower address. So, the space between the two is the process boundary. It is of 64 kilobyte usually in the C programs. So, these are the boundaries defined, the higher address and the lower address. So, in this, towards the lower address side we have the instructions. Okay. Then we have we might have defined some static variables, we might have defined some global variables. So, we give the space of the static and the global variable in the uninitialized data segment and initialized data segments. So, this is the space for static and the global variables. And then when a program is executing, dynamically we can allocate some memory. For example, we are using the malloc function. So, with the help of the malloc function, I can create the memory or I can allocate the memory at the runtime. So, if you are allocating the memory at the runtime, the space allocated for that will be the heap. Those who do the competitive programming, competitive coding, they must be knowing that the heap region is a smaller region as compared to the static regions. So, in case you have to use a bigger space of the memory, or if you want that the bigger range integers or the variables should be initialized, then you should declare them in the global section. So, now this is the heap region where the dynamically allocated memories are given the space or dynamically allocated variables are given the space. And then finally, with the stack one, which is the most important one with respect to a program. In the program, we define small functions. These functions, when called, are allocated some memory. Let us say if we are calling a function for 10 times in the execution. So, 10 times we will be giving the space to this function in the stack region. Every time a function is called, the space is given for the running entity of this function in the stack region, and we call that the activation record. Whenever a function will be called, the activation record will be given the space in the stack region. For example, here we have a program. In this program, we are calling a function named as my function. So, this is the definition of my function, this one. Now, the execution of these statements is sequential in the main program, but when we call a function, the control passes to the function. It means we are now going to allocate the space for an activation record, and this activation record will contain the return address, where we have to return address. Here it is 1004. Actual arguments, the actual argument is 10. Formal argument is integer n. When we have passed 10, we have accepted that in n variable in the function definition. Then the temporary variable, because in the definition of the function I have used a p variable. So, p is a temporary variable for my function, and then the return value, whatever will be the return value after the computation, that will be stored here. So, these are the contents of the activation record, and whenever we call a function, the activation record gets a space or activation record is pushed on the stack. For example, if we have, let us say, a factorial function. So, this factorial function is called for a variable n, and let us say we are computing factorial 4. So, we are allocating the space for activation record of 4, and this will be calling a factorial 3, and factorial 4 will be pending by then. So, factorial 3 activation record is created and is stored above the activation record of 4. Similarly, activation record of factorial 2 will call the function factorial 1. So, the activation record of factorial 1, and 1 will call the factorial of 0. So, activation record of 0 above this, and now comes the return. So, these are the activation records created in the stack region. They are pushed one by one, and when we will be returning, we will be popping the activation record. So, first the activation record of factorial 0 is popped, it will be returning the value to factorial 1, and then this will be returning the value to factorial 2. So, this will be popped, this will be returning the value to factorial 3, this will be popped, this will be returning the factorial value to factorial 4, and this will be popped, and finally factorial 4 will be returning the value to the main function or the function calling this. So, we have created the activation records one above the other. We are pushing the activation records on the one above the other. So, the previously called functions are pending, previously called functions are pending for the moment, fine. So, this is done in the stack region of the memory. Now, we have dealt about the process, we have seen that there are several segments of the process. Now, let us see that what are the different process states and what do they refer to. So, a process can be there in several states. For example, a process will be very new, okay? A process is a new process. So, obviously, when a process is there, when a program is there, that is there in the hard disk. Whenever we are making an attempt to bring the process, that also remains there in the hard disk, but when we are bringing to the main memory, it is active, it becomes active. So, some steps are involved before bringing the process into the main memory. So, a process which is very new, a process for which we have started the creation process, is a new process. When a process is there in the main memory and is ready for the execution at the CPU, we can say that the process is there in the ready state. A process was running and meanwhile it requires some input output. Input output simply means that whether you want the input from the user or you want the input of the instructions from the hard disk, or you want the input of the data from the hard disk, or you want the output to be done at some output device, all these are the input output activities. So, when a process is running, it requires some input output, it is taken out of the CPU, it is waiting for the input output to be done. So, that process will be there in the waiting state. Sometimes we call that it is a blocked process. We say that this is either a waiting state or blocked state. When a process is executing the CPU, or when a process is given the CPU for the execution of the statement, we say that the process is in the running state. When a process has completed the execution, when a process has completed the execution, we will say that the process has terminated, or the process is in the terminated state. There are two more states, suspended ready and suspended block. Let us take some time or some more time to understand this. Let us say in our system the memory is limited, main memory is limited. So, we can bring only limited number of the processes in the system. When a high priority process is required to be executed, we will be sending out some of the process already running in the system. It means that process will be temporarily blocked or temporarily sent to the hard disk, and when the high priority process which is just brought in has completed the execution, that process will be brought again. So, we are suspending the given process for a short amount of time, and then we will be bringing that process once again to the main memory. So, this is called the suspended ready state. Now, suspended ready means we are bringing a process from the ready state. Why not to bring a process from the blocked state? A process which is not running the CPU and the process which is doing the IO operation, let us send that process to the main memory. So, if we are bringing a process from the blocked state to the hard disk for bringing the high priority process in, we say that this is the suspended blocked state. So, let us see this with a diagram, an interesting diagram that is depicting all the states of the system. So, in this you can see that a process is just submitted, this is the new process. It is submitted to which place? It is submitted to the main memory. When it is given to the main memory, it means it is ready for the execution. When the process is ready for the execution, it means it is in the ready state. When the process is in the ready state, it is maintaining a queue there. There are many processes which are interested in executing the CPU. So, we are selecting one of the process from the ready state to go into the run state. So, when we will be sending it to the run state when the CPU is free for the execution. So, we can either schedule a process, or we can say that we can dispatch a process from the ready state to the running state. In case the process has completed the execution at the CPU, we will be marking it complete and send it to the termination state. So, we have seen 4 states as of now: new, ready, run and termination. Run state is when the process is there at the CPU for the execution. Now, let us say the process is at the CPU and the process requires the input and output. If the process requires input and output, it is brought from the run state to the waiting state. So, IO request has come, according to this we have brought it to the waiting state or the blocked state. When the IO completes, the process is moved to the ready state again. Fine. So, this cycle is continuing: new, ready, run, block, ready, again run, and if required block, then to ready, then to run, and if completed, come to the termination. Now, as I have already told you that if a high priority process is coming and we do not have any space in the memory. So, there are some of the processes which are there in the ready state in the main memory. We will have to create space in the main memory for bringing the new process or the new high priority process in. For doing so, we will be sending one of the process from the ready state to go to the hard disk temporarily, and this process will be brought back again when the memory will be free. So, we are suspending the process temporarily and we are suspending it for the hard disk. We call that the process is there in the suspended ready state. We can also do the same, do this with the waiting state. For example, if a process is there doing the input output operation or waiting for the input operation for the completion, let us send this process to the main memory for bringing send this process to the hard disk for bringing the high priority process in the main memory. So, that process will come in the suspended wait state or suspended blocked state, and when the memory will be free, the process will be brought from suspended wait state to the suspended ready state, and then it can be brought to the ready state as and when the memory is free. So, this is the cycle in which the process remains. Now, you can solve several problems related to this. For example, in this question it is asked that which of this statement is false. So, according to this, you can see that if a process makes a transition D, it would result in another process making transition A immediately. So, D means a process has gone from running state to the termination. Obviously, a new process will be brought from ready state to the running state. The next statement is saying a process P2 is blocked state can make transition E. E means block to ready, while another process P1 is run in the running state. Yes, possible. A process which is blocked can come to the ready state. See the statement number 3. The OS uses preemptive scheduling. Yes, the OS makes the preemptive scheduling. You can think of that the OS is making the preemptive scheduling. The last statement is the OS uses non-preemptive scheduling. Yes, if the OS makes non-preemptive scheduling, this is also possible, but according to the question in the following process state transition diagram, for a uniprocessor system, assume that there are always some processes there in the ready state. Okay, some process in the ready state. Ask that which of the following statements are true. So, obviously, second and third are true. So, the C option is correct. There are two types of processes that you should remember, that there are IO bound processes and the CPU bound process. The IO bound processes are those which spend more time for the CPU execution, and CPU bound processes are those which spend less time at the IO, but more time at the CPU. So, we need to create a balance between the IO bound processes and the CPU bound processes. In the subsequent lectures, we will be discussing about the different types of queues, different types of schedulers. We will discuss about the multi-programming systems and the performance of the CPU. This is the reference for this lecture. Thank you.